Hello everyone, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back with another video here today. And today we're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles coming into 2024-2025 NFL season. I'm really excited to talk about this team. I think this team is one of the most slept on, but also one of the most overrated at the same time. Just because I see on one side of the fan base, people love Jalen Hurts, think he's a god, whatever. I think this team's really, really good. And on the other side, I see everybody saying, well, this team really isn't going to be the same because Jalen Hurts sucks, Saquon Barkley's past his prime, the O-line's no longer good. So I'm kind of in the middle ground here, but we'll kind of see how much y'all agree with me. Before we get started, though, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment any suggestions for future videos below. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. First of all, let's go ahead and talk about the quarterback situation. Kind of the most obvious one to talk about. Jalen Hurts has had some pretty decent seasons, above 3,000 yards the last 3 seasons. At the very least, and over 3,500 in the previous 2 seasons. His rushing touchdowns, thanks to tush push, has been pretty much 10 plus throughout his career, and he's got a great committee. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, fucking great. Paris Campbell, suitable. John Ross, suitable. Everybody else, not too familiar with. When you look at this team, do you really expect more than that? Do you really expect more than what you see? It kind of depends on what your ideal thought about Jalen Hurts is, because if you look, he supported Devonta Smith and AJ Brown into 1,000+ seasons together. Like each one of them has had 1,000+ season together. And so Jalen Hurts obviously has a good supporting cast. Dallas Goedert's really reliable and gets you a decent amount of yards. But outside of that, is Jalen Hurts actually good? And my answer to that is he's just suitable. I think that everybody kind of either overblows his stat lines thanks to the system, but also think that he's probably above average quarterback, and almost in the same way that Brock Purdy isn't a great system, but he's also a decent quarterback. That's kind of my opinion about those two. Is that they're just very good for their systems. They are definitely above average in their systems, but also if you put them on another team, they're going to do fine. They're not going to be a second string quarterback. They're going to be a starter that's capable of doing stuff. It's just that they're not going to be as good as they once were in that other system, at least probably. So, I don't think I like the hate that's going on with Hurts. I like Hurts enough. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback necessarily, but he's definitely close. And again, he has a great supporting cast. You don't hate the player, hate the game. That's kind of what it comes down to. If the Philadelphia Eagles work with Jalen Hurts and the system works, let it go. Let them do what they got to do and be done with it. That's kind of my opinion with Jalen Hurts, and we'll talk about the stat line because I've been playing around with it. We'll see where it kind of ends up landing, but I got something in mind. Saquon Barkley added to this team, I think, is actually going to help alleviate some of the tush-push pain. Now, while I still think the tush-push will be a major consideration for the Philadelphia Eagles this next year, I either A, don't think it's going to be as successful, and as successful meaning it's probably going to lose like 20% productivity. Not like it's going to lose all productivity. I just think maybe it's going to be a little bit of a step back, adjustment year, and move forward. But 2, I think they could now use Saquon as kind of like, not as a bait-and-switch type deal, but almost as a, okay, we can either tush-push here at the 2 or 3 yard line, probably 2 yard line, 2 and closer, whatever, you get it. Or we could just give this to Saquon Barkley and have our O-line bug and block. I think that DeAndre Swift didn't add that skill level or that punch-through ability that would allow that. They kind of did some things with Kenneth Gainwell in that way, but they really didn't utilize it. So Saquon is actually kind of like a better Kenneth Gainwell. Everything Kenneth Gainwell does, Saquon does better. So Kenneth Gainwell is kind of just there for moral support and kind of a little bit of like, okay, we're not going to wear down Barkley. We're going to use Kenneth Gainwell in this situation. Mostly probably for first down markers, if I had to guess. So Saquon is going to be utilized more in the red zone than I think people are anticipating. Do I think he's going to do a whole lot? Not necessarily. I think my prediction for him is a little bit higher than I would like. But I also think he's going to get a little bit of love in the receiving game, so it could go either way. I don't really count receiving touchdowns because that could go anywhere for the running back position. You got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, great receivers, fucking amazing committee. They both stay healthy, which they have historically been very healthy together. They're going to do very, very well and possibly get another 1,000+ season together. Paris Campbell, he's suitable enough. Dallas Goedert, unfortunately, he's just not as utilized in the system in the end zone, so he's not going to get as much love in the end zone, especially with Barkley now, with the tush-push available, with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith being so good in that that area. Dallas Goedert's just going to get some love, but not as much as maybe some people hope he does. Then you got the O-line. The O-line is just as good as last year, minus, Jason Kelce, which, granted, Jason Kelce is awesome. It's definitely going to take a step back, which is why I think it's going to be an adjustment year for the tush-push. But again, I don't see this productivity going down too much. Now, what's weird about the Philadelphia Eagles is that they have a up and down coaching system, and I should say that as in their coaching is either really, really good or really, really bad, and it can snowball pretty well one direction or another. And they are kind of, I don't want to say falling behind. I don't think they are. I think that in momentum they are kind of losing some traction against some other teams, and I'm worried that they might regress some more this next season because, again, we've seen 2 seasons in a row where their second half of the season wasn't as good as the first. Now, granted, one of those was a Super Bowl year, so they obviously proved themselves right. And but yeah, I just think that their playoff run did gain some momentum back, but wasn't nearly as good as we hoped. So keep that in mind, is that I think there's been losing momentum ever since the Super Bowl loss, and I think it's going to kind of affect them going into this next season. Unfortunately, I don't have that as many slots left, and I do have to throw some darts at the map of where I think certain teams are going to go and how big of an adjustment is going to be made. So just kind of keep that in mind, that I don't necessarily think that the Philadelphia Eagles are bad, and I don't necessarily think they're great. It's just that they're going to fall somewhere in the middle of it, and I don't know where that will be. I'm trying not to spoil anything, but moving forward. Moving on. Defensive line is good. Again, I think like a lot of teams, I think their strength is going to be in the rushing game, or at least blocking the rushing game, or tackling the rushing game, whatever, you get it. They're going to put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. I just don't think it's going to be as much as it could have been. Like 2 years ago, they had a really good defensive line in pressures and attacking the quarterback. Last year wasn't as good, but I think it's going to be better this next year. I think Bryce Huff is really good. I like Devin White. I like Milton Williams. I think this team is going to do very suitable, and I think it's going to be very good. The secondary, I think, is both the most underrated thing and the most overrated thing. This is how I feel about the Eagles in general, is that they're just very overrated, underrated in a lot of ways. They either put up really good numbers thanks to their coaching, or they don't. And I don't know which in between they're going to fall in line for. So, C.J. Gardner-Johnson thinks he's going to have a good year. I think Darius Slay Jr. could have a good year. But again, it's more of those things where I think they're just going to kind of fall somewhere in the middle and, yeah, be done with it. Looking at their stats last year, DeAndre Swift was easily a 1,000-plus rusher, and he's not as good as Saquon. I love DeAndre Swift, but he's not as good as Saquon. DeAndre Swift got like 5 rushing touchdowns, and that's how it's going to kind of be. I think that this team's going to utilize the rushing game more with a better running back and maybe a slightly worse O-line. Jalen Hurts, he's going to get about 3,500-plus yards. He's not going to fall below that. He's going to be reliable. He's going to get a certain amount of touchdowns. I think his interceptions were high last year, and I do think because of the lack of O-line, or not lack of O-line, but the O-line's talent diminishment, I think it could stay that high. The sacks are not going to be that high. I think they're actually going to do pretty well in sack numbers and allowing sacks, so I'm not worried about that. A.J. Brown thinks he's going to have, again, it's hard to go from a 1,500, receiving yard season, or almost 1,500 yards, I should say. So I don't necessarily think he's going to do that well because, again, I think maybe if he was with a different quarterback, he could get that. But I think he's just going to not be as – he's not going to be in the 1450s, I don't think, but he's going to be pretty close. Devonta Smith, 1,000-plus last year. Again, it depends on how Jalen Hurts really is productive. And I just don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be – it's hard because Jalen Hurts, again, at 3,800 yards, pretty in the middle. So I'm not really worried about that. So moving forward with that. The O-line, again, already talked about that, and then the defense has either been really, really good or really, really bad. Not really going to go in between. Saquon, looking at his stats in the Giants in the last 2 years, probably, maybe even 3, hasn't had very good, O-line. So you see the productivity kind of go down, and especially the goal line carries. He's not had very good goal line carries in a hot minute. Now, granted, 2022 was like he was overutilized almost in some ways, but even 2021 or 2023 he was very utilized in a lot of ways. So again, how will this be? He got like 247 carries at okay, doesn't tell me the average here, but he got 247 carries for 962 yards. Is that going to be as much as the Eagles use him? I don't think so. But also his productivity. Oh, it does tell me the average 3.9. He's easily fucking capable of still doing 4.4 in average. So I just think that it's going to kind of overcompensate for the amount of carries he's going to lose to the amount of yards he's going to gain per carry. So, in rushing touchdowns, we'll see how it goes, but it could go anywhere from 5 to 12. Who knows how the Philadelphia Eagles consider him in the game plan. So, let's go talk about the stats, actually. The Philadelphia Eagles, kind of jumping right into it. Jalen Hurts, I think he's going to stay where he pretty much has in the last couple seasons. He's going to throw like 3,700 yards, probably around the same amount of passing touchdowns. I'm going to give him a little bit more just because I think, I don't know, just because Saquon's there, so Saquon's going to catch a little bit more, so that's kind of my only reasoning. 500 to 550 rushing yards. I mean, he's been about that. I think he's been a bit higher, but I think the tush-push capability is going to kind of diminish, and he won't be as mobile with that, so just slight reduction, nothing big. 9 rushing touchdowns versus the 15 and 10, I believe he's had in the previous seasons. I think it's going to be closer to the 2 years ago productivity with the tush-push. I see it working pretty effectively, but it's either going to, going to be diminished because of a second strategy, or they're just not going to as overly utilize it because of its diminishment. It may get picked back up by next year. I'm not saying it's not. Again, it's one of those things where I'm just taking a shot in the dark and saying it's going to go a little bit less, because it could go. I could definitely say it's 17 rushing touchdowns, but I just don't think that's realistic. It could be somewhere in between, like 11 or 12. That's probably more realistic. But I also want to take a shot in the dark at some of these things and say about 9. 13 interceptions. I don't know. I kind of just reduced the interceptions a little bit because, again, I think it's going to be utilized in the receiving game more or the passing game more. So reduce it because I think he's going to do better, but not that by much because I think he's still a bit of a risky thrower. Not the greatest greatest pocket quarterback in the whole league, but definitely still capable of throwing to a lot of touchdowns. Saquon, I think he's going to get 1,000 plus. I think people saying he's not going to get 1,000 plus are kind of crazy. 8 rushing touchdowns may be high. It may be high. I could see 6. I could see 7. But considering how good DeAndre Swift did, and he wasn't even really utilizing the goal line carries, I think Saquon also have a really fucking high ceiling. So Saquon's a risky pick, but I love Saquon. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. A.J. Brown will get like 1,400 yards, I think. Maybe 1,380, something like that. Slightly reduced, but still definitely good. 10 receiving touchdowns, about what he's been getting. Devonta Smith, slight reduction there, but 980 yards. I think he's going to be just short of 1,000. 6 receiving touchdowns, slight less, but again, I'm just predicting because I think this team's going to face a harder opponent as well. Dallas Goedert, he's been under 700 pretty much every season. Not as utilized in the red zone, unfortunately. So 3 receiving touchdowns is pretty reasonable. Moving forward, O-line, I think it's going to be one of the better O-lines. I think Jalen Hurts and his team is smart. And so I think, while I don't think under 30 is the top 11 teams in the league, but this basically puts them in the top 11 O-lines in terms of sacks. Sack predictions, again, they've been falling kind of in this number. So like their lowest number, I think, is 42 in the last few years. And I think their highest number's been like 70. I think they'll end up in like the 52 category because I think their pressures are going to be amazing. But otherwise, I'm a little nervous to see where they actually land. 11 to 13 interceptions. Again, somewhere kind of in the middle, more conservative, but it's a little bit low on the lower side too. Then finally talking about their schedule. Man, this is hard because I technically have only 2 slots left in terms of high, quote unquote high. And that's 7 to 9 and 14 plus. And so I said to myself, do I think the Eagles are 14 plus? And spoiler alert, I do not. So yeah, that does mean they kind of fall into the category 7 to 9 wins. Now, I do actually have a good justification for this. I do think the Eagles are very capable of winning 11 games. Let that be known. I think other teams are put in the 10 to 11 category and plus. I think I do see the Eagles as one of those potential teams that kind of lose that momentum because of 2 reasons. Either because I think their productivity is going to go down slightly, and so they're going to be facing off against opponents who have heightened productivity, or they're facing really good teams that are going to score very well. Like they're going to score against pretty well, or be scored against pretty well. It's because looking at the schedule, their division's kind of sneaky good. I don't hate the Commanders at all, and the Cowboys are obviously the Cowboys. Giants, I'll go ahead and say they sweep there, but they probably get swept by the Cowboys. I love the Cowboys this next season, and that's kind of fucking crazy. And I think they get split with the Commanders, so I think they lose 3 games there. They're probably gonna lose against the Browns. They could probably win against the Falcons, so 4-4. They probably win against the Panthers 5-4. I think they lose 2 of these games right here between the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Packers, and the Steelers. These are 3 damn good teams that could easily kind of upset a team, and that leaves them 6-6 going away from the home games. And look at the fucking away games they're facing: Rams, Ravens, Bengals, Buccaneers. Those are like at least 3 games they could lose right there. And so it puts them at 7 and 9, and like Saints go they can probably win their so it's 8 and 9, 9 and 8. Like that's not an unrealistic thought process at all. I think it's maybe a little bit against them, but also I think the Eagles are going to have a tough time keeping up score wise. They're not throwing the ball downfield like a maniac like they used to. Because again, Jalen Hurts, or they are, but they're not productive in that because Jalen Hurts is not meant to be that. They're meant to be quick, get points out their team. And in those games where they're really close and they can really batter down their opponents, Eagles are going to do great. But again, the 7 to 9 category does feel bad putting the Eagles in. But again, I have to kind of choose some teams that are going to be above the 10 plus win category, and I want to take some shots on some teams that I think are going to do very, very well. And the Eagles are not one of them. Hate me in the comments below. I completely understand, but I'm leaving 9 and 8, 8 and 9 as my prediction for the Eagles record this next season. And I'm kind of curious where they actually do line up. This is one of the teams I'm actually going to be looking out for this next season. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment and suggest for future videos below. I'll see y'all in the next one. See ya.